the aftermath of yet another massive community outcry has given us the opportunity to speak with player authority on the subject himself. Flying out of Corbantis and representing one of the largest subcommunities of Star Wars Galaxy's players, Sunrunner Signal is pleased to welcome Pilot Senator NarfBlinko. Narf, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Just for the many that don't normally play the space game, what is it that really makes it? What to you really sets it apart, makes it good, and gives it its identity?
For me, the thing that really makes space different is all of the little number munching that you have to do. You have to make sure each one of your parts has exactly the stats you want. You have to deal with the overloads, mass management, your energy management, all those little bits and pieces that make up a good, solid ship. And then you have to go out and put that ship to use. You're not going to just start hitting ships if you can't point your ship. That interactivity with the content is what really does it for me.
But like pretty much any other system in the game, it is flawed in some ways. What do you see as the bad parts of it that need to be fixed?
Wow, loaded question. I'd have to say probably the biggest difficulty is the fact that once you've mastered your first squadron, pretty much got all of the skills and parts necessary to pretty much wipe out any of the player versus environment content in the game. There's a few really hard missions that were introduced with Revenge of the Wookiees, and of course we're looking forward to the all but promised new space heroics that Dead Meat and Blickstev and the gang have sort of whetted our appetite for. But currently, once you get that first mastery down, another couple more, the PvE game just kind of turns into loot farming. Now for someone like me, who's a loot hound and a number cruncher, that's great, but for most people that's boring. So then folks are virtually forced into the player versus player combat area, and the difference in the game style between player versus environment and player versus player in space is so harsh. You go from being able to take hit after hit after hit from the NPCs to you take 2 hits, 1 hit, boom, you're dead. That's a good thing, otherwise fights will last forever in player versus player, but for the average newcomer to space, that can be a bit harsh.
What are some of the more noteworthy issues you've tackled for the community in your time as Pilot Senator?
Well, our biggest hurdle, first off, is bug fixes. Bugs have been in the game for 2.5, 3 years now, ever since the game launched. And Hans has been working his butt off getting a bunch of those fixed for us, and that's great. The current big issue was the last bill that I got to put up before the bill system got squashed, and that's some of these ships, especially the ships for the freelancer squadrons, just are not viable for use in player versus player combat. They work pretty well for player versus environment, but it's like the designers were expecting all of the player versus player combat to be Rebel versus Imperial, and kind of forgot that, there might be pirates wanting to take part in those battles too. So currently we've got the bill out there, number 43, for the lesser used chassis. Those are the biggest things, and the one bill that we got passed, and hopefully we get to see some effects of that either this week when they push Chapter 8 out to the test centers. Dead Meat was hinting that's coming after Thanksgiving. The time it takes to run your droid commands has been another barrier to getting people up and going and flying and trying the game. The bill that we got passed, number 33, those timers will be reduced significantly, changing a 4 to 5 minute preparation time down to hopefully a minute or less, and get players going and playing and hopefully having fun.
Although to some it probably seemed a lot longer, this debate over the gunship buff went on for roughly 24 hours before Dead Meat finally stepped in and relented on behalf of the development team. Do you think that was a fair amount of time for them to keep the idea open and out there in order to get an accurate idea of the community's true feelings for it?
Yeah, I don't think that was unreasonable. I think that was a pretty good amount of time. It was just, boy, the posts were flying so fast and furious, I can't imagine what their lives were like trying to keep up. The forums could barely keep up. There were lots of people who'd submit a post and the system would say, oh, it's not there. So they posted again and again and again, and there were people getting 4 or 5 posts up there because they couldn't see their own posts going.
Yeah, that's the reason my main forum account's banned right now. What do you think of the responses of the developers, both to the opinions and compromise ideas that you and many other players presented?
I have a sense that they were overwhelmed. They reacted like humans. Frankly, many pilots jumped down their throats before offering the constructive posts, so the natural reaction to that is, hey, you attack me, I attack you, and basically it spirals down into the nightmare that we saw. I kind of refer to that thread as the beast, in my post today, because it was really a beast. Their opinions are perfectly valid for them. I would have liked to have seen, I don't know if professionalism is the right word, just a little bit more effort on their part to hunt down the gems. There should have been more effort on the pilot's part to give them the constructive feedback that they really needed, but start messing with a system that works, the pilots tend to get upset.
Once again, just like we saw with the Athorian damage bonus idea, there was a huge community outcry that ended up averting this gunship buff idea. Obviously, it's good to have the developers listening, but do you think that maybe too much of this kind of input from the players could end up having negative effects as well?
Absolutely. It's good to have the players involved in posting and expressing themselves, but the nature of the posts, and I was just as guilty as the next poster, the nature of the posts have got to be constructive, calm, rational. I know I was contacted by a dev privately, and what ended up happening, there were good posts in that thread. I tossed up a couple. I saw a bunch from other players, Glorious Britannia and Leaf, and a bunch of other of the longtime pilots were posting calm, rational, well-constructed posts, but they were drowned out in all the noise of all the irrational rah, 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 rah. That kind of posting totally defeats player-developer communication. So if the players want to have feedback from the developers, and we do, we've been crying for it forever, when they do post, we can't lynch them for every little thing they say.
What could the developers do to lessen the learning curve and get new players into space more easily that wouldn't detract from veterans' efforts over time or resort to buff concepts like the one we just saw thrown out?
I don't really think the developers can do anything to lessen the learning curve without destroying the current game as it stands. Short of handing out really spectacular parts, short of handing out cookie-cutter ship loadouts and basically making everybody the same, I don't really see a way of lessening the learning curve. But I think the pilot community has done a tremendous job of lessening that learning curve. If an up-and-coming pilot wants to really learn how to play a pilot, they need to come to the pilot forum. Our frequently asked questions and our Pilots Academy list of umpteen gazillion guides will really help them lessen that learning curve. So I think that the player-created tools and aids would really lessen that curve more than anything the developers could do. Anything the developers do to lessen that learning curve will actually destroy not only all the work that's been done by all those pilots before, but it'll destroy the fun that those current pilots enjoy. And destroying the fun of your current players when trying to chase new players, in my opinion, was the fundamental flaw of the new gaming experience in 2005. And I really hope that Sony has learned their lesson and is not going to follow down that road again.
If a pilot for the Smugglers Alliance runs 4 Black Sun duty missions a week, Tier 4 and 5, to find the elusive Black Sun Ace Helm, after 2.5 years, how badly will the Empire have beaten the Rebellion?
I think there might not be a rebellion left by the time that pilot gets back to civilization.
Well answered. I think he's the first one that's gotten it right,
You'd be amazed how many people just get it wrong and start saying the Empire will never win.
But that's all the time we've got for today, so Narf, thanks once again for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Once again for the Red Dragon Platoon, Sunrunner's Empire, and the only server worth playing on, I'm Durgan Kale. Galaxies, keep logging in.
Hi. Do you suck balls at PvP? Crap.
I have received my proportion, and like the prodigious sun, I'm going with Sir Proteus. Okay, alright,
It's only like half English.
The developers have really shown that they know how to take it like a man, which I suppose means from behind.
And here's a look at the uber gunships.
Ta-da!
And not to mention the space boat. Did I say space boat? Spaceballs preview.
Spaceboat salute.